All you have to do is look at the Steam page for this game to understand where the community stands as far as this game is concerned. It is an absolute mess. The vast majority of it is technical discussions, and I 100% agree. The same way that I discussed Monster Hunter, it's basically something similar here. It doesn't look as bad as like Monster Hunter did with all the jittering. It's mostly NVIDIA GPUs and Intel CPUs. Now, I don't know if I got lucky because I'm on AMD, like both CPU and GPU, but I've not had a lot of the same problems people are having. And also, I stayed on the first patch, by the way. The people have been complaining that they introduced a patch to fix the game. I did not install that patch, so it's possible that that's why I did not get um, the worst of it. Now, make no mistake, this game is still bad. From a technical standpoint, it's still an absolute mess. The frame rate is all over the place. When you enter the menu, the frame rate like cuts almost in half, which is weird because most games it's the menu that has high frame rate, and then once you're inside the real world and everything is being rendered, then you get the lower frame rates. There's something fundamentally wrong with how this thing has been built. Now, with all that being said, after trying to play around with the settings to try and get the game to look and play well, I gave up and just went with the default settings that I guess you're sort of expected to run with these types of games, which is FSR, frame gen, all that stuff. I put everything on, and then the game became playable and responsive. At that point, I stopped benchmarking and just moved on with the game itself. Now, when it comes to the actual game itself, unfortunately, it's also not very impressive. It's very clear that it's trying to borrow a bit from Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and it is not pulling it off in any way. There is a certain cheapness about the game in the way that it feels, right? The way that, for example, health bars look, the way enemies function, and the way that the animations work, especially of the main character. The greatest game you can, there are two games that you can compare this game with, but it's easy to compare this to Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong. It seems to be running on the exact same engine as Black Myth Wukong. You can see the menus, you can see a lot of the design principles, a lot of the environmental assets look to even be exactly the same. So this is very similar and seems to be running on the exact same tech idea as Black Myth Wukong, but that game just looks infinitely superior. This would be like if you gave two people the exact same equipment and everything, but one is just more talented than the other. That's how this game kind of comes across. The main character's look, her animations, it's just not impressive when compared to how the Destined one looks in Black Myth Wukong. They managed to create a really cool looking character with the Destined one, and all his animations are done in ways that are really fun. When you're sort of walking around with your weapons, there is this stuff where he plucks things out of his hair. Yes, obviously that's because that's something that the god, the deity son Wukong could do. But still, there's the way that the animations move, the facial tics, the way that he flicks his hands, the little animations he makes as he stands around. When compared to this game, it just feels like it's made by artists that are just so much better than these ones. But in terms of the actual gameplay itself, it's still fun. This game encourages more of use of different weapons and magic, and granted, Wukong had that as well, but it sort of encourages you to experiment with various weapons, right? In Stellar Blade and in Wukong, both of those games have their character has like a specialized weapon. They have a specific style of fighting. Wukong with his staff, and Eve from Stellar Blade has a very specific way of fighting. She uses her blades, and she's very like flexible and somersaulty. With this game, it's sort of like Kazan the First Berserker or Dark Souls or stuff like that, where you have various weapons. Depending on which weapon you hold, your animation set is changed. So your character will fight differently based on which weapons they're using. It also focuses a lot on dodging and timing. It's sort of like how in Wukong you have the focus bars. You also here have these they call it Skyborn Might, whereby as you're dodging, if you dodge right on time, or if you install certain abilities in the upgrade tree, you can increase the various ways in which this resource is generated. And whenever you have this resource, you can then use it to execute magic abilities. In Wukong, it was only used to execute heavy attacks of different types. Here, you use it to, not heavy, but signature attacks of different types. Here, you use it to do your different spells and your different special attacks and stuff. I tried out the swords, I tried out the spear. It wasn't really working for me. I ended up settling on the axe, which I felt was... In most of these games, I find myself settling for a heavy weapon unless the game just doesn't allow it. I like the whole idea of, you move slowly but you hit hard. That kind of play style appeals to me a lot. And that I'm glad that this game allows you to choose that if you want. And just like with Wukong, you can respec your abilities. When it comes to writing, it is bad. Wukong and Stellar Blade both start with these bombastic openings that sort of get you invested in what the plot is. It's sort of like an easy way to buy in, to sort of get the customers buy-in. This game doesn't have that. It starts with you just asleep, and then you just wake up and you sort of walk around and talk to people and start figuring out what's going on. It's similar to Bloodborne, except at least in Bloodborne there's a little bit of a teaser clip to give you some rough idea of what's going on. This game only has females saying the words Wuchang, Wuchang, and then she's awake, and then that's it, you're off. It's not very well done in my opinion, and every enemy that you speak to, of course I was reading some of the responses on Steam to see how people are reacting to this, and I've seen people try to defend this dialogue by claiming that it's very Dark Souls inspired. While it might be Dark Souls inspired, they definitely did not execute it well. The thing with those games is that characters speak vaguely and the dialogue makes sense the farther you go along and things begin to kind of add up. That's not the case here. A lot of the characters here speak plainly. They're not being vague. It's just boring. They're not saying things in a way that's interesting. You can also compare this to something like Wukong. In Wukong, the characters use those Chinese proverbs and metaphors and rhymes and songs, and so it's very unclear what they're saying unless you know Journey to the West or you've already beaten the game once. When you play through the game a second time, it is so much clearer what everybody is talking about, despite how they're saying it. That's how this game now that's what you would think this would be inspired by, but that's not the case. This is just boring. It's not interesting. Every time I hear the characters speaking, first of all, they talk for so long, which is usually most of the Souls-like games do not do. They give the character like a few lines, which are very vague, and then if you keep trying to talk to the character, they'll just start repeating themselves. In this game, the characters speak for so long, to the point that there were so many points at which I just wanted the character to just shut up.
It's a reminder of how vibrant this town was. The fireflies inside, they seem to glow endlessly. A useful light for your path. I've tested it personally. With this, you'll have both hands free for weapons. Far more practical than a torch. Since we got separated.
Oh my god, can I please just move on?
The Tang Emperor's palace. But the refugees say the place has already been ransacked by rebels. Something's not right. I will track down the boatman. Then we'll meet in the palace.
Jesus.
I'll leave marks, pinwheels along the path. Follow them, and you'll find me.
They would bring up like 3 topics in one conversation. And that's just the first time you're meeting the character. You don't even know who the hell they are. It's just, in my opinion, this is not the right way to do this kind of thing. And I think that's the bigger issue, right? As far as the writing is concerned. It's just not very engaging, it's not very interesting. A lot of characters, you meet them the first time, they just dump a side quest on you. It's just very straightforward what they're asking you to do, but it's not interesting at all. At the point where I've reached, I am not at all invested in what's going on. I simply am moving along because of the combat, which is not bad. And if you get to the point where I've gotten, which is fighting this boss called Dutanga, at that point, if you can get past that, I think by then you've gotten the hang of it, and I think you're beginning to get the best parts out of the experience. Technically, it's still an absolute mess, but I think if you get it, there is something good in here, just like with Monster Hunter, but it's really, really rough. For sure, it's going to have a hard time, this one, I'm willing to bet.